If you clicked on this video, you're probably someone who has exams coming up in 2025, as well as someone who is ambitious and wants to get the grades which matches their potential. I sat my GCSEs in 2023 getting 12 nines, which is 12 A stars in the UK. With that same ambition as you and working incredibly hard, those grades actually were within the top 0.02% for the UK for that year. Having proud parents and simply just feeling fulfilled in all of your achievements is something that I want you to experience as well. So that's why I made this video. I'm going to be sharing with you everything that I know to help you get the grades which actually do match your potential in 2025. Now, I spent a lot of time thinking about the best piece of advice that I could give to people who are also in the same position as me a couple years ago. But because a lot of different people are watching videos like these, I try to make the advice more generalized. So it's not very GCSE focused. It's very exam focused. GCSEs and A-levels are obviously types of exams, but I feel like the advice I'm going to give today is advice that you could almost apply to any sort of exam that you may well be sitting within next year, the year after, or whenever. This is a core fundamental advice that every single person will need at some point in their life to do with exams. So the first thing that I intuitively thought of when I first sat down to script this video was, when should you realistically start revising for any set of exams? If you're from the UK, you probably know that your most important exams are held within the summers of most years, whether that's May, June, or July. During my exam year, I made sure that all of my notes for those exams were done in December, January time, so that I could start properly revising and going through content from February onwards. In this December, January time, I made sure that all of my notes for all of my subjects were at least present or somewhat up to date with the content that I'd reached you in school. So in effect, you are pretty much starting revising as soon as possible, specifically with your notes. Your notes are incredibly important because you don't want to be wasting your time making new notes from February, March, April time when you have exams in May. You need to focus in particular on revising the content and doing past papers in that February to April time. You don't want to be wasting your time making notes because that's not actually revising content. What notes do is that they make you able to revise. Making the notes themselves actually don't help you remember anything. What they do in reality is that they just give you an avenue to help you go and start revising in the future. So that's why you need to get your notes down and done quickly and early. By the end of January in 2023, I had between 80 to 85% of my notes completed, simply because that remaining 15-20% was about content that I hadn't really covered yet in school properly. So just a general rule of thumb is that when you complete content in school, make sure you make your notes as quickly and as thoroughly as possible on that content, so you don't waste time later on in the year going back to make notes on content you should have made notes on already previously. You may be thinking that this is a lot of work, and if you really want to get the grades that do match your potential, you'll be willing to put in this work, because this is the work, the necessary work, the work that's required to get those grades that you really want. And yes, it does require a fair amount of discipline. There may be times after maybe 5 or 6 weeks you've completed a whole chapter in physics or chemistry or whatever subject that you study, and you come home and you don't really feel like making notes on it. Maybe that's a job for future you to do. Once you make a habit of making notes as soon as you've covered a whole chapter, that's when the discipline required to do so actually decreases. That's because it's a habit, and habits usually don't require a whole lot of discipline. However, to make this a lot easier for you, my second piece of advice is that you don't need to focus on every subject equally. If you take my first piece of advice and you just think, oh, this is hard, I don't really want to do this, so I'll make notes on the easiest subject, or the subject that I find easiest at school. That's just like me making notes on French. I find French incredibly easy solely because my parents speak it at home and I've been exposed to the language from a very young age. I don't need to make those notes because I'm so used to the language already. It's just like you just picking the easiest and what feels like the most productive thing to do, when in reality, making those French notes, or if you find maths or English incredibly easy, making those notes won't actually take you very far because you already find that subject easy and you're doing things so that you can feel like you're being productive, which is honestly not a good use of your time at all. What you do need to focus on are the harder things, the subjects that don't necessarily come to you as easily. That was for me in English. In my opinion, that was my weakest subject at GCSE, and because it was my weakest, that meant I needed to put in more work, not less work, to get better at it. I know that sounds like common sense, but if you prioritize the easier things, you're essentially saying to yourself that the easier things require more work for you to get better at, and that's simply not true. Because the harder things, the things that you struggle with more, require more of your attention and focus. So hopefully from my first and second pieces of advice, what you've got from it is that you don't need to focus equally on every subject, but on the subjects which you do struggle with or you do find more difficult. Making notes and having and storing those notes is incredibly important for your revision in the future. My third piece of advice is all about organizing your time. Simply that if you don't organize your time, you will struggle a lot. So organizing your time seems like this whole scary concept. Do you need a massive calendar to organize your time properly? That's what I use because I've been doing this for the past few years. But what my friends do when I first introduce it to them, or when they just want to organize time for themselves, they use simple to-do lists. There's no point sitting down to study and having no idea what to do, because you spend a good 10 to 15 minutes trying to figure out what to do or what to do next afterwards, when you should realistically be spending that time doing your work properly. But if this concept of organizing time is quite foreign to you, then I think you should be focusing on your outputs instead. If you're quite new to this, your output is how much you produce in a day, or how many things that you do in a day. When people first start and all have the idea about organizing their time, they have the tendency to go and organize their day hour by hour. This is what I should be doing right now at 6 p.m. or whatever. That's not the way someone who's new to this should do it. Instead, they should focus on, if I want this day to be considered successful, or I've organized my time well, what would I have completed? Organizing time like this is so simple. You think about all the tasks that you need to do in a day. Let's say you've got some maths revision, English revision, and physics to do as well. If you say to yourself, if I complete these 3 tasks today, this day will be considered successful, then you go and ask yourself, oh, how long will all of these tasks take? Your maths will take half an hour, your English will take an hour, and your physics will take an hour as well. So if you can do 2.5 hours of that work, half an hour plus an hour plus an hour, in that day, then you will consider that day successful. And that's all you need to do at the moment to go and organize your time. When you become more advanced at this, then maybe start thinking about, oh, maybe I should be working at this time in the day, or at this other time, or I shouldn't be doing these things at certain times during the day. That comes a lot later when you get into the habit of making to-do lists and getting tasks done. For now, all you need to focus on is this to-do list. What do I need to do? How long will it take? And am I actually going to do it at a specific time? You should find a good answer to all of those questions every single day. And the last answer should be yes. Yes, I'm going to complete all of that work today. Leading on from the to-do list, my final piece of advice is that you realistically don't need to be studying for more than 4 to 5 hours in a day. And if you are, you're doing something wrong, and that's probably to do with your productivity. There were times where I was telling myself that, oh, if I work for 8 hours a day, I'll be considered so productive, not only by myself, but from other people too. What that turned out to be was me focusing on the number of hours I was sitting at my desk and not the output. The output is something that I've realized over the past 3 or 4 months, which is the most important thing when you're going to do work. You should be working to produce things and not working for the sake of increasing the numbers that you've worked for. There were times where I did work for 8 hours a day, but in reality, what that turned out to be was me sitting on my desk for 8 hours with my laptop or my pad and paper or whatever, and I only got 4 hours worth of output done. So I could have done those 4 hours in 4 hours of work, but I had decided, because I was so egotistical about spending so long working, that I was going to do those 4 hours of work in 8 hours. So there was 4 hours of productive work, 4 hours of unproductive work, and that meant that I had apparently worked hard for 8 hours, which simply wasn't true. So, what sounds more inspiring to you? Someone who does 4 hours of work in 8 hours, or someone who can do 8 hours of work in 4 hours? That second one should be more enlightening. If you can perfect your productivity to the point where you can do so much work in so little time, then you'll become almost a demon of productivity. You'll become so productive and so well-rounded in your work that you don't really have to spend a lot of time working to get a lot of things done. You will notice that true hard work for exams will never go unnoticed so long as you do it properly and productively. So I wish you all the best for your exams in 2025, and I will be continuing to post content on this channel to help you achieve the grades which are to the best of your potential. So yeah, if you did find this video useful, I've got a Discord down below in my description, but I'll see you in the next video.